It started with a scream, not mine, not at first, but it ripped through the building like a thread snapping loose in a sweater you always thought would hold. At exactly 8:46 p.m., every light in the complex blinked out and the city outside followed like a domino line falling. Darkness swallowed everything sudden and absolute. No flickers, no warning, just silence and then that scream. I was mid-step, carrying a bowl of tomato soup I'd heated for my dinner after yet another lonely Zoom meeting with my boss who didn't know my name, when the lights died and the scream punched through the air. The bowl shattered at my feet, red liquid pooling like blood around my socks. For a few terrifying seconds, I couldn't move because I knew that scream. It belonged to Kira, my ex, the one I hadn't spoken to in almost 7 months. The one who still haunted my apartment in ways I never told anyone, not even my therapist. And she wasn't supposed to be here. I stumbled toward the sound, glass crunching underfoot, heart hammering like it wanted to punch through my ribs and sprint down the hallway without me. The emergency lights in the hallway hadn't kicked in and I had no flashlight, just a dying phone and memory to guide me. I should have texted someone, called 911, but I didn't. Instead, I moved toward the voice like some idiot in a horror film, drawn to the pain I thought I'd already survived. But that's the thing about grief, it isn't linear. It coils around your ankles and drags you back under just when you think you've reached the shore. The building seemed different. Shadows stretched wrong, rooms felt smaller, like the walls were pulsing inward, breathing. And then I heard her voice again, softer this time, whispering my name like a prayer or a curse. Kai, she called. Kai, is that you? I can't see, and just like that, I was no longer in control of my body. I ran, not because I still loved her, hell, I wasn't even sure I still liked her, but because love doesn't end neatly. It unravels, slowly, messily, and sometimes violently. I turned the corner, expecting to find her hurt or scared or bleeding, something cinematic. But what I saw instead made my stomach drop. She wasn't alone, she was holding someone. A girl I didn't recognize, curled against her like a frightened child, both their eyes wide and shining with tears. Kira's arm was twisted at an unnatural angle, but she looked at me like I was the one bleeding. And the girl beside her had my necklace around her neck. The one I'd lost the night Kira left. I froze, my breath caught somewhere between a gasp and a scream. The girl, her staring at me with wide, wild eyes, didn't even flinch when I stepped forward. I wasn't sure what hurt more in that moment. The sight of Kira's injured arm or the realization that the girl in front of me was wearing the necklace I thought I had lost forever. The silver pendant, the one Kira had given me on our first anniversary, had slipped from my neck on the night she walked out of my life, and I'd never found it again. I could feel the bitter weight of that loss around my chest now, like a phantom limb that I couldn't shake. That was my first betrayal. And now this stranger, this girl, this other, was wearing it like some kind of cruel reminder. Kira, my voice cracked as I said her name, and I hated how weak it sounded, how small I felt in front of her. It wasn't supposed to be like this. She wasn't supposed to be here in the dark with someone else holding my necklace, acting like the world was still revolving around her. The weight of everything we'd been together flooded back, the warmth of her hand in mine, the feel of her breath against my ear when she whispered she loved me. I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But instead, all I could manage was, what the hell is going on? Kira's gaze shifted to the girl beside her. She didn't speak at first, her lips trembling like she was wrestling with words that wouldn't come. The girl squeezed her hand, silent reassurance in a way I could never understand. And then Kira spoke, her voice barely audible, like she was confessing something dangerous. I don't know, Kai, I don't know how it happened, she said, looking at the girl with a kind of tenderness I hadn't seen in years. Her eyes glistened in the dark, her face pale under the dim emergency lighting that flickered hesitantly on the ceiling. But this is Micah, she's my sister, my little sister. The words felt like a slap to the face, and I took a step back, trying to process the surreal scene unfolding before me. Your sister, I repeated, my voice hoarse. Kira, what the hell are you talking about? Her eyes met mine with a mixture of guilt and confusion, and for the first time in months, I saw the faintest crack in the armor she'd built up after leaving me. A crack so small but so deep. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible, her sister, but that didn't make sense. The Kira I knew never spoke of a sister, at least not in any meaningful way. She had never mentioned anyone, let alone someone who would be tied to me in such an intimate, painful way. Kira looked down at the floor, her gaze shifting from me to Micah and then back to the fractured space between us. She seemed to struggle with the words, like they were too heavy for her to lift. Micah didn't know about you, Kira whispered, her voice trembling. I never told her anything. I thought if I just let go of everything, I could move on, but I couldn't, not from you, not from this. Her eyes flickered to Micah again, and I noticed for the first time how closely the two resembled each other. They had the same sharp jawline, the same tilt to their eyes, but the differences were striking. Micah's innocence clung to her like a cloak, while Kira's eyes had long since been hardened by the weight of secrets. The same secrets she had buried so deep even from her own sister. Micah shifted slightly, her hand still gripping Kira's like she was afraid the dark would swallow her whole if she let go. She seemed to be waiting for something. I couldn't tell if it was permission or an explanation, but she wasn't looking at me. Her eyes were locked on Kira's face as if trying to piece together something that had been fragmented long ago. And then Micah did something that snapped me out of my dazed confusion. She reached up, her fingers brushing the pendant around her neck, the same one that had been mine, the one I had lost. Why does this necklace feel like it belongs to me now? Micah's voice was soft, unsure, as though she wasn't asking me or Kira, but rather the universe itself. She seemed to be caught between two versions of her reality, the girl she was and the girl she was becoming. And maybe, just maybe, it was the same for me, for us. My heart clenched, not out of jealousy, but out of something far deeper, an unfamiliar tug, as though a thread connecting me to both Kira and Micah had suddenly been stretched thin and the tension between them was tearing me apart. Kira let out a strangled breath, her lips parted as if the words she needed to say had somehow been locked away in a chest she couldn't open. I didn't know how to tell you, Kira muttered, barely audible over the pounding of my heart in my ears. I thought I'd lost you for good when I left, and I thought maybe, just maybe, if I stayed away long enough it would stop hurting. But now seeing you here again with her, it feels like everything I've tried to bury is coming back to life. Her voice broke, raw and unfiltered, and in that moment the walls she'd built so carefully crumbled. Not for me, but for Micah. Not for a love that had already died, but for a family torn apart by the same silence I'd been living in. The truth hit me like a wave I hadn't been prepared for, and it knocked the air out of my lungs. Kira hadn't left me just because she couldn't handle us. She had left me because she had a family to protect. A family I never knew existed. The silence that followed Kira's confession felt like it had stretched into eternity, wrapping itself around the three of us in a way I couldn't escape. The air was thick with unsaid things, with the weight of history pressing down on us. I wanted to be angry, hell, I had every right to be. I wanted to shout at her, to demand answers about why she hadn't told me, why she had kept this secret from me all this time. But instead, all I could do was stand there, lost in the sheer complexity of it all. There was this part of me, the part that was still in love with her, that wanted to reach out, to touch her, to somehow erase the time we'd lost. But then there was the other part, the part that had learned to survive without her, to live in a world that no longer revolved around the two of us. I couldn't tell which part of me was winning, and it terrified me. Micah, sensing the tension that was thickening the air, shifted nervously on the floor, her fingers still clutching the pendant. Kira, she murmured, breaking the silence with a soft, uncertain voice. You told me this was where we'd find the answers, where I'd finally understand. But I don't know what this means. Her words were fragile, as if they could shatter with the wrong movement, and in a strange way they felt like the truth, because none of us knew what any of this meant. We were all standing in the same dark room, fumbling for a way to make sense of the tangled mess of our lives. Kira's eyes softened, but there was something resigned in her expression now, something that felt final. I didn't think it would come to this, she said, barely meeting my gaze. I thought I could protect you both from the pain. I thought I could choose who to keep safe, who to love, and who to leave behind. But now I see that was a lie. There's no more safety. There's no more control. Her voice was breaking again, and I couldn't tell if it was from guilt, from regret, or from something deeper, something more painful that she had yet to admit. And then, as if on cue, the lights flickered back on, faint, hesitant, but enough to reveal the full picture of what had been happening in that room. Kira's arm was bruised, swollen in a way that made me want to rush forward and help her. But then I looked at Micah. Her eyes were wide with confusion, her chest rising and falling rapidly, as if she too had just come to terms with something she never expected. It hit me like a wave. This wasn't just about Kira and me. This was about family. This was about broken people trying to put themselves back together, each piece a jagged shard they weren't sure how to handle. And the necklace, the one I thought I had lost forever, suddenly felt like the final piece of a puzzle I had never known I was supposed to solve. In that moment, everything shifted. The power had come back on, yes, but something else had flickered to life in the darkness, something stronger, something more real than any of us had anticipated. Micah, who had been the quiet observer, suddenly stood up, her eyes meeting mine, the pendant swaying gently around her neck. I don't know you, she said softly, but there was a weight in her words that felt like a declaration. But I think I need to know you. And in that moment, my world shifted again because for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was no longer the one who needed to be saved. Micah's words hung in the air, sharp and unexpected, pulling me out of the whirlwind of emotions I'd been trying to contain. I think I need to know you. They weren't an invitation, not exactly. They were a challenge, a quiet demand for something neither of us understood yet. It wasn't just about Kira anymore. It wasn't even just about the broken pieces of a love that had once felt like everything. It was about the wreckage left in the wake of all the things we'd left unsaid, all the years we'd spent apart, and the spaces we had yet to fill. I wanted to say something in return, something profound, something that could stitch together all the loose ends of my heart, but I couldn't. The words didn't exist. Instead, I just nodded, a silent agreement to the unknown path we might now walk, however treacherous it might be. Kira's eyes flicked back and forth between Micah and me, her face pale under the soft glow of the lights, her breath coming in shallow bursts. It was clear now this wasn't about redemption, not for her. This wasn't about fixing the mess she'd left behind, about stitching her own wounds with promises and apologies. No, this was bigger than that. This was about survival, about rebuilding something we never thought we could touch again. I could see that now clearer than I'd ever seen anything in my life. Kira wasn't asking for my forgiveness. She wasn't even asking for a second chance. She was just asking for a way forward, a way to move beyond the hurt, to move beyond the walls we'd all constructed to keep the truth from breaking us open. But the problem with truth is that it doesn't stay quiet for long. And once it has your attention, it refuses to be ignored. I stood there in that dimly lit hallway with Micah's gaze still locked on me, and I realized something else. The power had never really gone out, not the lights, not the city. The power that had been out was the power we all had to change our own stories, to rewrite the paths we thought we were stuck on. Kira had been running from something she didn't even know how to name. Micah had been searching for something she couldn't define. And I'd been waiting for an ending I hadn't known I was writing until tonight. I don't know what this means either, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the sound of my own racing heart. The words weren't a promise, they weren't an apology, they were just a simple truth I don't know. But in that moment, I understood that not knowing was enough. Maybe it was always going to be enough. Kira's face softened, a tear slipping down her cheek as she reached out to touch Micah's hand, then mine. A quiet, broken circle of people standing in the dark, all of us waiting for something. But now the dark didn't seem so threatening, it felt full of possibility. The night the power went out was supposed to be the end of something, but instead it was the beginning of something I never expected, a love that didn't ask for clarity or answers, a love that just was in all its messy, unpredictable beauty. And as I looked at Micah, my heart still tethered to the woman who had once been my everything, and now to this girl who held my past in her hands, I realized that maybe, just maybe, the power had gone out for all the right reasons. Not to destroy us, but to light up the parts of us we hadn't known were still alive.